Hi, very glad to see you on the channel. Before you start listening to the story, write in the comments whether you like the voice on the video. It was just a 4-day trip, nothing dramatic. Hardware convention up in Asheville. I've been going every year since I took over the store from my father, and Megan never minded. Said it gave her a chance to catch up on books and practice her choir pieces without my hammering and humming in the background. She kissed me goodbye like always, told me to drive safe, even slipped a snack bag in my truck with those trail mix clusters I liked. But when I came home late Thursday evening, something felt different. The porch light was on. The house was clean. Too clean. Megan had candles burning in the living room. Sandalwood, not her usual lavender. And the dining table was set for two, which would have been sweet if I hadn't told her I was eating with vendors on the way back. She greeted me at the door with a hug, warm but fast. "You're home early," she said, brushing past my shoulder to close the door behind me. I raised an eyebrow. "Told you I'd be home by 9. She laughed a little. "Right. I forgot. It's been a weird week. We ate leftovers." She talked about choir rehearsal, a new solo she might get for the spring fair, and how Susan, her best friend since high school, had stopped by with fresh peaches from her cousin's orchard. I listened, nodded, answered her questions, but my eyes kept drifting to little things. The faint smell of cologne near the back door. A blanket folded on the couch, not our usual one. Her phone buzzing once, screen face down, silenced. That first night, I didn't say anything. I chalked it up to travel fatigue. Maybe I was just noticing more after being away. But the next morning, something else caught my attention. I opened the laundry closet to toss in some work shirts, and there was a crisp, clean button-down shirt hanging alone on the drying rack. Not mine. Not my size. Dark blue, no tag. I held it for a moment, confused, then called into the hallway. "Hey, Meg, did you get me a new shirt?" She peeked around the corner. "What?" "Oh, no. That's for the donation box. I found it in the choir room last week. Figured I'd wash it before dropping it off." "Ah," I said. "Nice shirt to be giving away." She shrugged and disappeared back down the hallway. Later that day, I stopped by the store to check on things. Ricky, my assistant manager, said Megan had come by Tuesday afternoon looking for a new lock for the basement door. Said she looked a little flustered, claimed she lost the key. I didn't even know the lock was broken. We barely used the basement except for storage. I asked Megan about it when I got home. "Oh yeah," she said quickly. "I spilled something down there and didn't want the dog getting in. Figured it was better to be safe." The answer was fast. Too fast. Like she practiced it. That night, I found her humming a melody in the kitchen. It wasn't one I'd heard before. Soft, low, almost jazzy. Nothing like the gospel hymns she usually rehearsed. When I asked what it was, she blinked. "Just something Jesse played during rehearsal," she said. "We were goofing off after practice." Jesse, the choir director, new in town 6 months ago. Tall, charismatic, wore vests even when it was warm. I didn't know much about him other than the fact that Megan had mentioned his name more and more over the past month. Still, I didn't say anything. Not yet. But when Sunday rolled around and we were eating brunch at our favorite spot off Route 60, that's when it came. No warning. No beat up. Just her voice, soft and strange, right after the waitress poured our coffee. "I've been thinking," she said, looking out the window. "Maybe we should try an open marriage. Just for the excitement." I thought she was joking. I laughed. She didn't. Her fingers tapped the edge of her mug, like she was waiting for permission. "You're serious?" I asked. She nodded slowly. "We've been married 12 years, Brian. Maybe shaking things up would help us reconnect." I didn't respond. Couldn't. I just sat there, coffee cooling in my hand, while something in me shifted. "Broke, maybe." She kept talking. About exploration, about being honest, about how it wasn't a betrayal if both people agreed. But I hadn't agreed, and she knew it. What I didn't know, not yet, was that she wasn't asking. She was telling me what she'd already started. After that brunch, I kept hearing Megan's voice in my head. "We should try an open marriage." The words looped like a song you don't like, but can't shake. I couldn't decide what bothered me more, how casually she'd said it or the way she'd smiled after, like she'd just suggested trying a new brand of toothpaste. I hadn't answered her that day, not really. I paid the bill in silence, drove us home with the radio off, and when she asked later, "Are you mad?" I told her I needed time. She accepted that. No fight. No pushback. That's what bothered me most. She expected it. Like she already knew I'd have questions. She'd planned around them. That Monday, I showed up at the hardware store earlier than usual. Just needed to be away from the house. I fixed a leaky faucet in the back and restocked the lumber aisle, even though that's Ricky's job. Anything to keep moving. Around 10, Lena came in looking for shelf brackets. She just opened her flower shop again after a small remodel and was asking what size screws she'd need for floating shelves. I helped her find them, then walked her to her truck. She smiled when I opened the door for her. "You all right, Brian? You seem far away." I hesitated, then shook my head. "Yeah, just didn't sleep. Too much coffee or too many thoughts. Little of both." She looked at me for a second longer than expected, then drove off. I stood in the parking lot for a moment, wondering what I was supposed to do now. Go home and ask my wife if she was already seeing someone? Ask her if this open marriage was a polite way of telling me she'd found someone better? That evening, Megan was humming again, same melody as before. Something slow and bluesy. She stood in the kitchen wearing her choir shirt, stirring a pot of stew and singing like she was in another world. I walked in, leaned against the counter, and watched her for a second before asking, "What's that song?" She turned halfway. That melody you keep humming. It's not from the church." "Oh, Jesse played it after practice again. I guess it stuck in my head. Doesn't sound like a worship song." She shrugged. "It's not. He said it was something he wrote back in college." I nodded, letting the silence stretch. "You two spend a lot of time together." She didn't look up. "He's the choir director, Brian. We rehearse 3 times a week." "And what about after rehearsal?" She paused for half a second. "Just long enough. Sometimes we go over notes. You know how picky he is with harmonies." I stirred the stew. "You ever think maybe harmonies don't need to be that perfect?" She smiled. "Well, it's a choir, not a bar band." I left it at that, but something about the ease of her answer didn't sit right. She was too polished, like she'd rehearsed the conversation before I ever opened my mouth. Later that night, I checked her phone. I hadn't done that in 12 years of marriage. Never had a reason to. But when I picked it up from her nightstand and saw that it was locked with a new passcode, I had all the reason I needed. She used to leave it open. Now, she guarded it like a bank vault. I didn't mention it the next morning. Instead, I took a different angle. I called her friend Amy. "Amy," I said casually, "is Megan still rehearsing on Thursdays now?" She hesitated. "Thursdays? I thought y'all changed that." "I haven't been at practice for a few weeks. Too much with the kids, but last I heard, it was Monday and Wednesday." That was all I needed. That night, when Megan came home late from rehearsal, I greeted her at the door. "How was practice?" I asked. She smiled. "Exhausting. Jesse had us running the same 2 verses over and over. I swear he thinks we're recording a professional album." I leaned in, kissed her cheek, and nodded. "Glad you're still enjoying it." She changed out of her choir shirt fast, tossed it in the wash before I could blink. I sat there on the edge of the bed while she disappeared into the bathroom, water running like white noise, her voice faint as she sang that same melody behind the door. But the name Amy gave me stuck in my head. Matthew. She'd mentioned him once. Said he was new to the choir, played keys. I remembered him being quiet, tall, wore round glasses, and had a limp. Something about that felt too safe, too harmless, which is exactly what made him worth watching. The next few days passed like a slow drip. Megan acted normal, woke early, made coffee, left for choir errands, came home humming that same low tune. Every time she sang it, I felt like it was mocking me. I stopped asking questions, stopped pushing. The thing about lies is the more space you give them, the more they stretch. And Megan's lies were beginning to pull tight across every part of our life. Thursday afternoon, she said she was heading out early for extra rehearsal. Again. That was the 3rd extra this week. She left around 4, leaving a half-made casserole on the counter with a note that read, "Pop in at 6. Won't be late." The handwriting was rushed, like she'd written it in the driveway. I waited until her car backed out, then walked straight to the guest room. Not the bedroom, not her purse. The guest room had become her quiet zone lately. She'd said she was organizing things for the spring fair. I started with the closet. Boxes, craft bags, wrapping paper rolls. Most of it looked untouched. but tucked between two old choir robes, I found something that didn't fit. A small gift bag, light blue with silver tissue paper peeking out the top. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled the paper back. Inside was a leather-bound notebook. New, high quality, expensive. It wasn't just something you buy on a whim. There was a pen tucked inside, one of those fountain pens you have to refill. There was a note attached to the notebook, folded once and sealed with a gold sticker. I didn't want to read it. I already knew it wasn't for me, but I opened it anyway. For your songs. I hope they find a space to grow. You inspire more than you know. No name. No initials. No signature. Just that. I closed the card, replaced everything exactly how I found it, and sat there in silence for a long time. My hands were still, but my chest was burning. Whoever it was, she wasn't just meeting them in passing. This was deeper. She wasn't experimenting. She was investing. I could have torn the note in half. Could have called her, asked her where she really was. But that would have ended it too soon. I didn't want a confession. I wanted the truth on my terms. Quiet, measured, undeniable. So I took the notebook to my workshop in the garage. I used a razor to carefully slice a few pages out of the center. Not enough to ruin it, just enough to make it bend the wrong way when opened. Subtle, just annoying enough to ruin the feel of writing in it. Then I placed it back in the bag, sealed the card like nothing had happened, and returned it to the closet. That night, she came home late, hair damp, said it had rained suddenly on her way to the car. I nodded, didn't tell her it hadn't rained a drop in town that night. How was rehearsal? I asked. She shrugged off her jacket. Fine. Jesse wants us to try harmonies differently. Again, did Matthew show up? She paused slightly. No, he's still out sick. That was a lie. I'd seen Matthew at the store that morning buying batteries. Looked healthy, gave me a wave, and asked if we had any more cedar planks coming in. I didn't challenge her. I just said, huh, and sipped my coffee. The next day, I checked the gift bag. Gone. The closet was tidy. The robes hung evenly, like nothing had been disturbed. I didn't ask where it went. I didn't need to. That Saturday morning, I watched her leave early again. Choir cleanup, she said, grabbing her keys. We've got to organize the costume closet before spring fair. She kissed me on the cheek and disappeared out the door. I followed 5 minutes later. I didn't tail her car. I just drove into town, circled the square, passed the church once, then parked behind the floor shop where the back alley gave a clear view of the rectory. No other cars in the main lot. But behind the church, parked at a slant, was her car. I didn't see her go inside. I didn't need to. I waited. Quiet. Still. And when I saw the choir director's car, pull in 20 minutes later, parking next to hers like it belonged there, I felt the last piece fall into place. I still didn't know for sure, but I had a target now, and I wasn't letting him out of my sight. I didn't want to believe it was Jesse, but the facts stacked up like bricks, and I couldn't ignore the weight of them. He was charming, young, talented, the kind of man people described as magnetic with that edge of admiration they didn't know they were giving away. He ran rehearsals with a casual flair, joked with the choir like they were all lifelong friends, and most important, he and Megan spent more time together now than we did. Sunday, after church, I stuck around instead of heading home early like usual. I said I had something to fix in the utility closet, but really I just watched. Megan didn't know I was still there. I stood half in shadow near the side of the building, behind the stained glass windows, watching the choir mingle after service. Jesse clapped her on the shoulder once, leaned in, and said something that made her smile. Her hand rested on his arm a second too long. He laughed, casual, and walked away. She stayed, watching him go. I clenched my jaw but stayed put. That wasn't enough to accuse someone over, but it felt like more than friendly energy. It felt like something practiced, familiar. On Monday, I asked Megan what Jesse's wife thought of all the rehearsals. She blinked. Wife? Yeah. Does he have one? She shook her head a little too fast. No. Divorced. I think. He never talks about it. I nodded. Seems like someone who wouldn't. That night, I stayed up late, sitting in the living room with the TV on mute, pretending to scroll my phone while Megan read a book across from me. Every few pages she'd glance at her phone, read something quickly, then put it face down again. Around 11, she stood up and stretched. I'm heading to bed, she said. You coming? In a minute. She nodded and walked upstairs. I waited until I heard the door click shut. Then I got up, walked to the kitchen, and checked her phone charger. Her phone was gone. I stood there in the quiet for a long minute, then walked upstairs. Our bedroom door was cracked. Inside, the lights were off, but the glow of her phone screen lit up her side of the bed. She didn't hear me step in. Her voice was soft, low. No, he doesn't know. He thinks it's just rehearsal stuff. I backed away before I heard the rest. My mind filled in the blanks. The next morning, I drove straight to the church after dropping off a delivery at the store. I didn't knock on the front office door. I went around back where the choir kept their gear and waited. Sure enough, Jesse showed up a little after 9, carrying his messenger bag and a cup of coffee. I walked straight toward him. "Morning, Jesse." He looked surprised. "Brian, hey. Everything okay?" I smiled. "You got a minute?" "Sure." I waited until we were inside the rehearsal room, the echo of our steps bouncing off the old stone walls. "I just need to ask you something," I said, man to man. He looked nervous now, eyes darting slightly. All right. I think something's going on. Between you and Megan." He raised both hands slightly. "Whoa, Brian, no. Absolutely not." "You sure about that?" "You're with her a lot. People are starting to talk." He took a step back, shaking his head. "Look, I don't know what you've heard, but I promise you, nothing's happening. She's a friend. That's all." I stared at him. "What about the extra rehearsals? The late-night messages?" His brow furrowed. "Extra rehearsals? I haven't added any. We've kept the same schedule for weeks." Now it was my turn to blink. "No Thursdays?" "No, we're off Thursdays." I swallowed hard. "She told me she's with you. Every Thursday." Jesse exhaled, tension breaking across his face. "Brian, I don't know what's going on, but I can promise you I'm not involved." He looked hurt, honest, and that confused me more than anything. I thanked him, left, drove around the block twice before pulling into the hardware store parking lot and just sitting there in my truck. I'd been so sure, so ready to name him the villain. But he wasn't the one, which meant someone else was. And Megan had let me chase shadows while the real thing stayed hidden. The trap she'd set wasn't just a lie. It was a perfect distraction. By the time I pulled myself together enough to head home, the truck's clock read nearly noon. I sat in the driveway longer than usual, staring at our front porch like it belonged to someone else. For a minute, I almost believed I'd imagined everything. The phone calls, the gift bag, the Thursdays. Maybe Jesse had it right. Maybe Megan was just lonely, and I'd been too checked out to see it. But deep down, I knew better. The problem wasn't that I saw too much. It was that I hadn't seen enough. When I stepped inside, Megan was in the kitchen unloading groceries. A white sundress, hair pulled back, sunglasses still sitting atop her head like she just stepped out of catalog. "There you are," she said brightly. "I was starting to think you ran off with the truck." I smiled, muted. "Just had to make a few stops." She moved around the kitchen like everything was normal. Light on her feet, voice breezy. But I'd learned to listen under the words. And under hers, I heard control, precision. She glanced at me while placing peaches in the bowl. "You all right? You look tired. Didn't sleep much. You need melatonin or something." I poured a glass of water and watched her closely. "How was practice?" She didn't even blink. "Good. Jesse's trying a new arrangement for the Easter piece. Said the altos were a little flat last week." I stared at her. "Funny," I said. "He told me you hadn't had rehearsal at all." That made her pause, just for a second. Her hand stopped over a bag of flour. Then she smiled again, small, soft. "Oh, he probably meant the main group. I was working with just the altos this week." "Just you and him?" She laughed. "No, Brian. Don't be weird." She turned back to unpacking. Just like that. Like she hadn't danced around the truth again. And that laugh, too light, too fast, wrapped her lie like ribbon. I didn't push. Not yet. That night, I watched her leave her phone on the charger and head into the bathroom. I waited 5 seconds, then picked it up. Still locked. Still with that new code. I set it down without trying. No point in guessing. She wouldn't be sloppy there. But then I noticed something odd. The call log on our shared landline in the hallway, a feature we never used, had been cleared. No missed calls. No outgoing. Just blank. She'd wiped it clean. Why? The next morning, while she ran errands, I searched her car. Nothing obvious. But the glove compartment had an envelope tucked in the back with her handwriting on it. Rectory Utility Access. It was a single page, a maintenance form, and signed. But at the bottom was a note. Extra keys held behind office paneling. Ask before use. It didn't make sense. That was church property. Why would she have a note like this? I folded it back and left it where I found it. At dinner, I casually asked, did the church ever fix the wiring down near the basement? She blinked. The basement? Yeah, I heard there was a short down there last year. Oh, I think Jessie mentioned something. Not sure. She was slipping. Small, subtle, but slipping. That night, after she fell asleep, I sat in my workshop and started connecting dots. If Jessie wasn't the one, then who had access to the rectory after hours? Who could move unnoticed? Names came to mind. None fit, until I remembered the kid from the choir. David, 16, sharp, observant, one of the tech helpers during rehearsals. He once told me, there's more going on in that church after hours than anyone admits. Back then, I thought he meant teenagers sneaking snacks or playing music too loud. Now I wondered if he meant something else. I made a mental note to talk to him, because someone was using the rectory when no one was supposed to. And Megan had a note about how to get in. She wasn't singing harmony anymore. She was composing a lie. I spent the next few days watching Megan like a man studying storm clouds. I didn't speak much, didn't ask questions. I just watched. When she moved through the house, I took note of what she touched. When she left for errands, I noted what she didn't take. And when she hummed that melody, slower now, almost whispered, I knew it wasn't just music. It was memory. I started keeping track of her schedule, even when she thought I wasn't paying attention. She was consistent enough to appear normal. Church, grocery store, choir, home. But the cracks in the pattern came quietly. Like when she left for choir rehearsal 20 minutes earlier than usual, but didn't return until nearly an hour later than normal. Or when she told me she was going to Susan's house, only for Susan to show up at the store the same afternoon asking if I'd seen Megan lately. I didn't blow up. I didn't accuse. Instead, I told Susan that Megan had gone to the post office, and Susan nodded like she half knew already. By Friday, the lie had weight. I felt it in my chest when I woke up. I knew something was going on. I just didn't know with who. But whoever it was, they weren't new. That much I could tell. This wasn't sudden. It had rhythm, familiarity. That afternoon, I stopped by the church under the pretense of checking a light fixture I donated last year. It was an excuse, but nobody asked questions. Jessie wasn't there, but the back hallway lights were on. I took my time walking through the side corridors. Nothing obvious, nothing out of place. But the door to the rectory office, normally closed, was slightly ajar. I looked in, empty, but something caught my eye on the desk. A coffee cup, still warm, 2 lipstick stains on the rim. I stood there, staring at it for a long moment, then backed out without touching anything. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed listening to the ceiling fan spin, Megan breathing steady beside me, her hand resting lightly on her stomach like it always did when she was relaxed. And I hated how calm she looked, like the weight was gone for her. I left the house early the next morning, said I needed to check a supply order at the store. Instead, I parked 2 blocks away from the church and waited. Megan had told me the choir was meeting at 9:30 a.m. for a surprise extra rehearsal. She'd said it with a smile, her tone smooth, no hesitation. At 9:27, her car pulled into the lot. At 9:31, she went inside. At 9:43, I watched another car pull in. Not Jessie's. Not anyone from choir I recognized. It was Tom Willis, the church's building manager. Late 50s, gray hair, broad shoulders. Megan had mentioned him once in passing months ago, said he helped her carry some music stands to the back room after a long practice. I never gave it a second thought. Until now. He parked, looked around once, then walked quickly inside through the back entrance. I waited, heart pounding against my ribs, time crawling by. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. I couldn't sit still anymore. I pulled around and parked near the side lot, walked to the back door, and found it cracked slightly open. Inside, the hallway was quiet. I moved slowly, footsteps careful, listening. The echo of voices, low, indistinct, drifted from the direction of the storage wing behind the rectory. I followed the sound. At the last door on the left, I stopped. Silence. I held my breath, leaned forward and listened. Then, soft laughter. Hers, followed by a man's voice. Muted but close. I reached for the doorknob. Paused. This was it. The line between knowing and not knowing. The difference between suspicion and proof. I turned the knob slowly, barely enough to move it, and peeked inside. The room was dimly lit. No one visible from the angle. But shadows moved beyond the divider curtain. I could feel it, my pulse thudding in my ears. I stepped back. Quiet. Careful. I didn't need to see more. Not yet. I left the church through the same door I'd entered, got in my truck, and sat in the driver's seat gripping the wheel until my hands hurt. She wasn't just lying. She was hiding something real, and I was done waiting for it to reveal itself. I was going to pull the truth out my way. By Sunday morning, the last thread of doubt was gone. I didn't tell Megan I knew. I didn't ask questions or play dumb. I just let her talk, nodding in the right places, watching how easily the lies rolled out. She said she had to be at church early to help Jesse organize sheet music before service. I smiled and kissed her on the forehead. Of course, I said. They're lucky to have you. She smiled back like nothing in her world was broken. After she left, I went to my workshop and picked up the old camcorder I used to record inventory tutorials. I charged it, tested the lens, then tucked it into a small black case. I wasn't filming to go public. I just needed truth with no room for denial. My own proof. For myself. For closure. An hour later, I drove around the back of the church and parked in the gravel lot that few people used. I knew the angles now. The way the light filtered through the old basement windows, the sound of certain doors clicking shut. I knew where the fuse box was and which hallway light never turned on. I slipped through the side entrance, made my way past the storage closets, and stopped at the janitor's cabinet. That door had been left open a few times when I'd visited the week prior. Inside, nestled between cleaning supplies, was an old folding chair. I pulled it out quietly, set it in the shadowed corner opposite the door to the music room, and sat with the camera in my lap. It didn't take long. At exactly 9:42, Megan entered through the back hallway. Alone. No music folders. No sheet music. She wasn't carrying anything. She wore a soft gray blouse and jeans. Casual. But her hair was done. More makeup than usual for a Sunday morning. She didn't go toward the choir room. She turned down the far corridor and disappeared behind the last door. The same room I'd watched the shadows move in just 2 days earlier. 10 minutes passed. Then he arrived. Tom. He didn't knock. He didn't check to see if anyone was watching. He walked straight in. I hit record. For the next few minutes, I filmed nothing but a closed door and silence, broken only once by a short laugh, hers. It was the same tone I'd heard at home when she thought I wasn't listening. Not joyful, not forced, just comfortable. That was all I needed. I stopped the recording, rewound it, and watched the few minutes again. The way he walked in, the way she'd gone first, the pause between them. There was no mistaking it anymore. Tom wasn't a fling. He wasn't a mistake. He was routine. He was the reason Megan never blinked when she lied. I left without a sound. Back at home, I placed the camera in the drawer of my desk and sat in the quiet. The clock ticked steadily. I could hear the hum of the fridge, the distant chirp of birds through the window, the ordinary noises of a home that, until now, had felt like mine. I looked at the framed photo of us on the mantel, taken 8 years ago during a trip to Savannah. We were laughing, or pretending to. I wonder now how much of that day was real. Megan returned around noon. She walked in with a coffee in hand, humming the familiar tune, and said, "Service went long. Jesse's trying to rewrite the closing hymn." I nodded. "Did you eat?" "Not yet," I said. "I'll make us something." She moved to the kitchen like everything was normal, like the floor beneath us hadn't already cracked. I watched her for a while. How effortlessly she stood in the space we built together, how easily she used her voice to fill the room with half-truths. And in that moment, I wasn't angry. I was calm, because now I had what I needed, and she had no idea what was coming. I didn't sleep much that week, but not from rage. I was done being angry. What replaced, it was a sharper kind of energy. Focused, methodical. I moved through the house like a man preparing for winter, packing what mattered, discarding what didn't, lining up what would come next. Megan never noticed. Or if she did, she didn't ask. That was the strangest part. She still kissed me goodbye in the mornings. Still texted me from church rehearsals or the grocery store or Susan's, wherever she claimed to be. Still laughed at my dry jokes over dinner. But her eyes never really looked at me. She was somewhere else. Someone else. And maybe I was too. On Thursday, I walked into Lena's flower shop. It wasn't for flowers. She looked up surprised. "Brian, mind if I talk to you a second?" She set down her scissors and led me to the back room without a word. I told her everything. Not every detail. Not yet. But enough. Enough to explain why I'd been quiet. Why I hadn't called. Why I looked like someone halfway through starting over. She didn't ask for proof. She didn't press. She just nodded slowly, her face soft and unreadable, then said, "What do you want from me?" "Company," I said. "Just once. The church fair. This Sunday." She tilted her head. "You want me to show up there? With you? I want Megan to see that not everything revolves around her anymore. That she doesn't hold the last card." Lena was quiet for a long time. Then she smiled, just barely. "All right," she said. "Let's make her uncomfortable." We didn't meet up again until Sunday morning. I told Megan I'd be arriving late to the spring fair, said I had to help Ricky at the store. She didn't argue, just said, "Don't miss my solo," and left in a hurry. By the time I parked on the edge of the fairground, Lena was already waiting near the food tent. She wore a pale green dress that stood out against the crowd without trying to. She didn't ask if I was ready. She just linked her arm through mine and nodded toward the stage. The fair was already buzzing. Kids with painted faces, the smell of kettle corn and barbecue in the air, the hum of small-town life rolling through familiar faces and Sunday politeness. We didn't make a scene. We didn't need to. We walked through the booths like we'd been doing it for years. I stopped to chat with the pastor. Lena smiled at two of the church ladies she used to volunteer with, and I bought us lemonade from the youth group stand. People stared. They always do when the story doesn't match the pictures they've built in their heads. Megan was up next. I knew it. I could hear the choir director testing the mic. Then her voice rang out, clear and practiced, from the stage speakers. She was halfway through the first verse of her solo when her eyes found me in the crowd. That's when she saw Lena. Saw her hand on my arm. Saw the way we stood. Close, easy, not faking a thing. Her voice cracked for a breath, barely noticeable to anyone else. But I caught it. I watched her blink, hesitate a half second before finishing the line. When the song ended, the applause was polite. Nothing wild. She stepped down from the stage, smiling, but it didn't reach her eyes. Lena leaned in and whispered, "Want me to hang back?" I shook my head. "Come with me." We walked toward the church tent together. Megan was standing near the back, her solo barely behind her, surrounded by a few choir members. Her smile faded the moment we stepped within 20 feet. "Brian," she said, stepping forward. "I thought you made it just in time," I said. "Heard your big moment." Her eyes flicked to Lena, then back to me. "Who's this?" Lena extended a hand. Lena, florist, old friend, and apparently very recent company. Megan didn't take her hand. I looked her in the eye. "You want it open," I said. So I opened the door and found someone who makes me feel full. Her mouth opened like she was about to object, but nothing came out. Lena smiled kindly. "We'll let you get back to your fans." And just like that, we walked on. No yelling, no questions, just truth, standing in daylight for everyone to see. Thank you for listening to the end. I hope you enjoyed it very much. Don't forget to give a like and tell us in the comments what you would do in such a situation.